So I think that's super exciting. And then, I mean, like I said, the sky's the limit. And it's also about finding different ways to reuse water in your landscape, and then putting in plants that are not as water dependent, or if they are water dependent, using those healthy soil techniques to maximize efficiency in that area as well. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about, of course, about all the benefits of water-wise gardening, and then all the tools that come along with it. We're also going to be talking about things like recycling water, specifically rainwater, gray water, and drip irrigation. So to start, I always like to start with compost. My business is called the Compost Gal. So for me, compost is the foundation for any successful garden, as far as providing nutrition, as far as water holding capabilities. Compost can hold its own weight in water, so which is absolutely perfect. And then also it lends a lot of benefits in regards to keeping plant diseases at bay and pests at bay, because compost has this great ability to not only keep the moisture level on an even keel, it also has the ability to keep things like soil temperatures on an even keel as well. So if your plant doesn't have to go through these periods of wet and dry or hot and cold, they're going to be able to function a lot more normal than without compost, to be honest. So compost is going to be the best way to really hold on to water a lot longer. We have a couple different types. The one on the left is called basic compost. That's more of a soil amendment. It is usually a combination of yard waste, food scraps. And so when I use it, I'm going to add, at least 1.5 to 2 inches just on the top of my soil. That's called top dressing, and allow, as I water the soil, allow it to percolate down in through there. And again, it's got that great moisture holding capacity for that. The other one is also compost, but I'm going to treat it more like a fertilizer. That's mostly used for things like food scraps. Those are worm castings, and I just create those in a worm bin right here in my living room. And like fertilizers, you do have to use them sparingly, but it is a complete nutrition. It is something that you make yourself. It doesn't involve any chemicals, which is great for water quality, as well as your plant's ability to take up that nutrition. Now, stuff like Miracle-Gro, it does exactly what it says on the box: quick, fast, lush growth. And I can only imagine what it'd be like to go, say, from 2 years old to the age that I am now, over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, and what a stress that would put on your body. Something like worm castings is something that's going to be a slow release fertilizer, and your plant's going to be able to take it up on its own time. So when it comes to terms of, I like to work these in concert, because they are both compost, but they all have different abilities, which I think are both important. And then on top of that, mulch is going to be another added factor. Now, I think compost and mulch together are a great combination. And I'm going to be talking about sheet mulching for those who may not be familiar as we get further into the slides. So finding a nice coarse mulch is going to be, again, similar to compost. Is going to increase the water holding capacity in your soil, as well as also help regulate temperatures and moisture. So when you work those together, it's really a great combination. So for perennial beds, woody plants, fruit trees, stuff like that, I'm going to put mulch around those areas, about minimum of 3 inches. When we talk about sheet mulching, there may be more mulch that you may have to use depending on what you're trying to kill. You can purchase mulch. A lot of things that's going on right now is recycled content mulch. So hardscape yards are either trimming down things like untreated pallets and dyeing them different types of colors. Or you also have the option of getting something like arbor mulch, which I do specifically love because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be free. Arborists have to be able to pay somebody to take mulch to where it needs to be dumped or where it needs to become, ends up being maybe compost. But depending on the organization, now I've got to pay someone to haul it. I've got to gas, hours, traffic, everything that's involved with the transportation of, materials across the Bay Area. But say the arborist happens to be in my neighborhood, I've called them, I've put my name on a list. I know exactly roughly about the amount of amount of mulch that I might be getting. And then they'll call me that morning and say, hey, this is, Bill from whatever tree service. We're going to be in your neighborhood today. Would you like the mulch? I have the option of saying yes or no. If I'm ready to mulch, if not, I go back on the list. If not, then they come and they just show up and they just drop a big pile of mulch in the area that I pick. So that helps really the tree trimmer out as well as is helping you out, at least as far as cost wise. And then there's things like straw or like a fine mulch. Fine mulches, I'm not going to use this much. I'm going to use maybe about 1 to 2 inches around mostly my annual plants. I've included some other types of kind of thin, fine mulches, pine needles, things like straw. Straw is probably the most common thing that's used. I might use pine needles for acidic plants, something like blueberries, or if I'm growing something like camellias or rhododendrons that are used to the acidic soil. If you do end up using pine needles, you're definitely going to want to make sure you break those up a little bit. So because that cuticle is very waxy, and so it's going to take a long time for it to break down. But you can use straw, and like most things with mulch, they do have great water holding capabilities, but you do have to be cautious, especially with the coarse mulches, that you don't put it too close to the base of your trees or the base of your perennial, your plants or your woody plants, because too close could have, not the best effects. You want to give them a little bit of space. So sometimes you'll see in places where the mulch is just right up on the base of the tree. And, because of those water holding capabilities, if left too long in that area, eventually something is going to wear through the bark. And then that's when diseases get in. And then that's when the tree starts to decline. So I always say, I'm not looking for something in a turtleneck when it comes to mulch. I'm looking for something a little bit off the shoulder. So you're going to want to give the main trunk or the main stem of your plant a little bit of space. And then usually that empty space I like to fill definitely with compost. So you always want to make sure that not too close. Hydrozoning. Grouping plants together by their water needs. Also too, you always have to take into consideration of their kind of sunshade needs together. So I'm not going to grow succulents and tomatoes next to each other. They have 2 completely different water needs, and then somebody is going to suffer depending on who I water for. So it's going to keep my plants nice and healthy and alive. Hydrozoning can also be done by, of course, grouping them together, water hungry plants with water hungry plants, drought tolerant plants with drought tolerant plants. But if you have a smart controller, irrigation controller, you can create these different zones and then be able to adjust the water accordingly to what those needs are. So, and again, you can go, sky's the limit. You can completely nerd out when it comes to stuff like smart controllers, things with GPS. So they know that rain's coming, your irrigation won't come on at all, or a soil probe indicating that your soil has enough water so irrigation doesn't have to come on. So said that the sky's pretty much the limit. And the thing is, it's nice because you didn't have to worry about overwatering your plants as well, because that is definitely a plant killer. All right, I see something in the Q&A. I'm going to take a peek at it. Oh, that's a question about sheet mulching, and I will definitely get to that when I get to the sheet mulch question. So I will let you know. Does anybody have any questions, live questions? I'm happy to take a live question. All right. I will move forward. Biointensive edible planting. So this is kind of like a 4,000-year-old tradition that has become adopted here in the States. There are a lot of benefits to biointensive edible planting with the idea of kind of just dispelling the idea of row culture. Row culture itself creates too many gaps. There's too much open soil, especially if these people aren't using stuff like mulch in order to increase the water, not having just bare soil on there. These plants that when they're planted closer together, they basically create a living mulch. So the ground is covered. It also holds onto water because it's a lot more shadier, and you're able to put a lot of more plants in a smaller area. So that way you can really maximize your yields and the plants. Usually there's a lot of inputs, depending on how you're growing it. More plants means, of course, you may have to either amend or fertilize a little bit more often in order to keep the nutrition at balance. But other than that, you can really maximize on stuff. And then really also focuses on kind of closing the loop and focusing on building healthy soil. I have a great example in my next slide. There we go. So we have a 3-foot wide row with traditional row culture, but imagine that you can go ahead and put a lot more plants in that same area for biointensive planting. And then some of the great examples that I'd like to share with you when it comes to that is the idea of companion planting, growing things for mutual benefit, or growing things for things like pest control. So in this example, imagine that the one on the left is maybe just tomato plants. So I have a row, maybe there's space, 18 inches apart, 2 feet for tomato plants, depending on the type. And now I'm going to add stuff in the middle. I'm going to plant like carrot seeds among my tomato plants, or I'm going to plant basil along the edge of my tomato plant. So now the one bed that I have that was originally just tomatoes, now I've increased it and I've kind of helped it along by doing companion planting along with it. If you're ever interested in taking a look at delving deeper in biointensive planting, look up John Jevons, Jeavons. He runs an organization actually outside of Willits, and he does workshops out there about biointensive planting. And he's done it all over the world and helping different people maximize yields, maximize water, build healthy soil, so on and so forth. All right, so now we're going to get into the pretty pictures. So a lot of our great little water-wise plants. The nice thing about living in the Bay Area is we do have the option of California native plants. They are already suited to our climate and to our nutrient-poor soils. So that totally works out. But fortunately, because we do live in a Mediterranean climate, we do have the option of incorporating Mediterranean plants that are also drought tolerant, but are from other regions, just to kind of mix it up, because some of them are unusual and interesting, have interesting colors, leaf shapes, they're variegated. So feel free to mix it up. I mean, I figure as long as it's drought tolerant, you really can't go wrong. So some beautiful examples. I'm just going to go from the top left corner. Buckwheat, beautiful. It comes in a variety of different colors. We have mallow. It's in the middle on top row. Our state flower, the California poppy. Below in the corner is penstemon, Matilda poppy in the middle, and then Mexican bush marigold on the end. All wonderful, wonderful, colorful plants. This, however, is my favorite plant. If you have space for any one plant, that is a great catch-all plant that it does so much for such a little plant. It's yarrow. It comes in a variety of different colors. It is a California native. I believe the native flower is white, but it is gorgeous. It requires some full sun for sure, and it flowers in the summer and the fall. Long term, the birds like the seed heads afterwards. But the thing that I love about it the most is bees love it, butterflies love it, and it is the host plant for at least 5 different types of beneficial insects. So if you're growing things like food, or if there's any issues that you may consider having, things like pests, especially things like sapsuckers, like aphids and whitefly and scale, stuff like that, yarrow is a great catch-all for that. And it's just absolutely gorgeous as well. It can be, depending on the variety that you get, sometimes it can be a bit of a spreader. Fortunately, you have the option, of course, of just taking it up and then dividing it and replanting all the different chunks as well. Manzanita. It's a beautiful evergreen shrub. Some of the distinctive features of it are its little urn-shaped flowers, white flowers that are beautiful, and the wonderful red bark, kind of peely kind of bark. It does come in many forms, so be sure to read your labels and maybe do a little research before you do, because I can get it where it's a gigantic tree, 10, 12 feet tall, or I can get it as a ground cover that maybe only gets a couple inches off the ground, but maybe spreads about 2-3 feet. So making sure that you read your labels and making sure that you believe what the labels say. So that way you can plant according to mature size. That's also another really important factor when it comes to putting plants in the landscape. So it really does great with poor rocky soils, which means clay. It's great for things like slopes, if it could require a little bit of drainage, which is nice. And it just becomes a beautiful, beautiful plant. I think I have some. There we go. There's the urn-shaped flower of the very interesting bark. It's very gorgeous. And then it produces a little fruit that looks like an apple. Manzanita, I believe, means little apple in Spanish. This is another great catch-all plant like yarrow is. It does come in a variety of forms, super big tree down to ground cover. The California lilac, it's also known as ceanothus, that's its scientific name. It flowers in the spring. The bees are all over it. But again, like yarrow, bees love it, butterflies love it, and it is also a host plant for beneficial insects as well. So if you have a fair amount of room, you can't go wrong with a beautiful ceanothus. And then the flowers themselves, they range in color. I've seen them from white to a very, very dark royal purple. They call that one dark star ceanothus. That one is gorgeous. Flannel bush. This one is very tall. So if you have the space for it, its distinctive features are it's kind of flannel-like, fuzzy kind of leaves. If you have some issues with deer in your area, they don't like it. They don't like that fuzzy. Right now, I believe it is blooming right now. I know a lot of municipalities use them now as kind of street trees, or along the side of the road kind of trees, and they're very lovely. They do come in a dwarf variety, so if you don't have 20 feet to spare, then or 12 feet to spare, then you can go with the dwarf variety. And again, they do like slopes. Most of the things that do like slopes are usually drought tolerant plants, even in clay, for sure. They do like that. So when it comes to planting it in your garden, if you can, it's always nice to kind of create what they do like, a little bit of extra drainage if you don't have a slope for that. This one I don't believe is a California native. However, I like it as a plant because it gives you maximum benefit for a lot. Full sun, um, bees and butterflies. But the best thing about it is it blooms all the way from early summer all the way into our first frost, which for us is what, November, December, something like that. It's blanket flower, and I just think it's gorgeous. So there's great ways that if you can figure out when things bloom, you can plant it in your garden. So something is always going to be in bloom in your garden. I think this is a great plant for that. Salvias or sages, one of the largest genus of the mint family. Most of them prefer full sun. They're usually kind of hot plants. They do like that good drainage. The thing about salvias is, and for those who may or may not be familiar with them, is they're all incorporated in the same family, but they all look slightly different, semi-different. Your traditional, Mexican sage, I believe that's pineapple sage. On the right, hummingbird sage was the one that we took a look at. That one's more of a ground cover. You can cut these babies back once they've flowered. A lot of people like to cut them back in the fall and the winter and let them return. So it's basically just like getting a fresh plant every year. Nothing wrong with that. Some of the other benefits, I've talked about some of these. Provide food and shelter for native species. They attract pollinators. Many of them are drought tolerant. The one on the right, that's the red bud. Those are in bloom right now. So you can see a lot of them. They're just kind of just peeking out among the stuff. So those beautiful kind of pinky purple kind of flowers are kind of showing right now. And that's one of the nice, great benefits of native plants is the fact that when all the annuals have gone, summer's over, here comes fall, and all the annuals are now, dormant or dead. That's when the native plants really come out, get a little bit of rain, and you can have some beautiful flowers all the way through until spring. All right. Some tips for planting, of course. If you can, especially those who are drought tolerant, the ones that usually require some extra drainage, you can plant them on mounds. When we talk about sheet mulching, I'm definitely going to be talking about the idea of using the materials you have on hand to create mounds for not only for drainage, but just for visual interest as well. Coarse mulch, about 3 inches of course around the plant. Again, we're looking for something a little bit off the shoulder. And while during the sheet mulch process, I'm going to be incorporating compost as part of that process, that is the only food that my native plants are ever going to get. Mostly it's just there to help get them established, to, of course, to increase the water holding capability in the soil. So it's going to give the plants an opportunity to get well established. Planting them in the fall and the winter, especially now that we're having a fair amount of rain. I'm not sure what our rain situation is going to be in the coming months, but planting them in fall and winter to give them a chance to get adjusted, to force their roots down further into the soil. So when the heat of the summer comes, they're definitely going to be a lot more prepared and ready to go. And of course, during the first, depending on the type of plant, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years for them to get established. Usually the fleshy ones get a little more established quicker. The woody ones usually have a tendency to get a little bit more, take a little bit more time to get established. So you will have to water them or supplement their water in the summer months and the hot months. And ideally, if we end up with a decent season of rain, then you won't have to worry about watering them. And again, that water is going to force the roots down further and further into the soil, giving the plant more stability and then more ability to handle any heat when the summers do come. I talked about this planting for mature size, and just really believe what the labels have to tell you. If it says it's going to be 20 feet wide, it's going to be 20 feet wide. So you want to make sure that you're not going to want to plant everything too close, because unless you're trying to create kind of like a meadow where you're not going to need to walk through, but even then you want to make sure, because you don't want to overshear. You don't want to worry about things like overcrowding. Sometimes with overcrowded plants, that's where pests definitely like to kind of hang out. So those are just a couple of things to take into consideration when planting. Talked about hydrozoning. I'm sorry. Let's see. We got a couple more sheet mulch questions. I will definitely get to that. I'm almost there. Yes, I'm happy to get copies of the slides. I'm happy to, if Michelle, that's okay, I can send you a PDF of the PowerPoint and you can distribute it. Because I have no problem with that.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll have them sent over to everyone.
Okay. Yeah.
Who signed up.
Yeah, I have your email. I can just email you for that. I talked about the tips for planting already, about this little section about planting in the fall for sure. So succulents. Succulents are also wonderful, wonderful plants. They're very, very drought tolerant, and I think they're excellent additions to kind of any kind of garden. They are weird and unusual. Their flowers are beautiful, and they work in all different types of situations. I usually like to, since they don't really require too much water, I do like to incorporate them along with native gardens, and then I usually plant them, around the native plants. Some instances I may put irrigation on them, but for the most part, I just allow them to take advantage of whatever's happening around them irrigation wise, because again, too much water for them is not going to be, they won't be long lasting for that. Like I said, they make some very unusual flowers, and they're very gorgeous, I believe. And they're fun. And a great thing about succulents is chances are you probably have a friend who has succulents, a friend probably who has too many succulents. See if you can get some cuttings off of that. Get the cuttings off that, allow the cut pieces to scab over, and then just pop it into the soil. And it's going to go ahead and root and provide you with a beautiful plant. When it comes to planting things with rosettes, like the big flowers, I like to plant those kind of on mounds and plant them at an angle. So as I walk by, I can see the rosette as opposed to planting it up where I can't see the rosette. So everyone gets a chance to take a peek as they walk by. All right. Got to the section about sheet mulching. So for me, sheet mulching is kind of the foundation for any really successful water-wise gardening. I believe it's a great marriage of things like cardboard, compost, and mulch, and where we're using cardboard as a weed blocker in order to definitely to keep weeds at bay. But again, all these materials that are included with sheet mulching are organic in nature. So eventually they will break down and they will enter into your soil, and they're going to help build that soil. So in the case of something like a sandy soil is going to clump up. Sandy soil is notorious for draining a lot of nutrition and draining a lot of water. So sheet mulching is going to make those sandy particles clump together so that we'll be able to hold on to water and nutrition a lot longer. When it comes to clay soil, it's going to have the opposite effect. Clay holds on to water and everything with a very, very tight fist. Sheet mulching over time is going to help aerate that soil so roots can penetrate down a lot easier, so nutrients can percolate further down into the soil as well. So let's get into it. All the great benefits of sheet mulching. Again, we're promoting healthy soil and plants. You give soil love, it returns the favor by keeping our plants healthy, taking care of things like diseases in the soil, taking care of pests before they become pest problems. Sheet mulching is great for unused areas. So if there's just an area like a weed patch or just a patch of soil that you have no idea what to do with, why not just sheet mulch it? Especially if it's something like a problematic soil for you. You'll sheet mulch it, give it time to kind of rest and start working, kind of its magic in there. And then when you're ready to do something with it, you could plant right into the mulch. Mulch itself creates like this kind of blank canvas from which to build up from. And it saves you money, water, and time, especially if you're trying to get rid of something like a lawn. You get your Sundays back or your Saturdays. You're not going to have to irrigate as much. Even if you're incorporating things like these drought tolerant plants, it's definitely not going to be the amount of water that you normally would in order to keep a lawn green, lush, and living. Excuse me. Weed suppression, which right now is a big thing because it's weed season. It's going to help minimize erosion. Anytime you have any organic material, whether it be mulch, plants, even weeds on top of the soil, all that organic material keeps the soil in place. So sheet mulching itself over time is going to help minimize things like erosion for sure. It protects the environment. And there's a lot of different ways that actually does that. If you say you end up getting free mulch from an arborist, and the arborist doesn't have to transport those materials over long distances, so it's saving things like greenhouse gases. It is taking into consideration that these materials, even though we do have a lot of counties have a landfill ban for organic materials, so that organic material no longer has to be in the landfill. And then a lot of ways you're closing loop. Maybe you have an arborist over to your house to do some tree trimming. Maybe they bring some free mulch. They trim, your trees, and they leave it there as well. And it's also capturing carbon, especially with the use of compost. The use of compost over time is going to be able to pull significant amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere and put it in the soil. And the nice thing about sheet mulching is sheet mulching kind of creates this little blanket. So you're not going to disturb the soil. There's not going to be any tilling or anything involved. And so as that carbon starts to work its way into the soil, it becomes food for all our wonderful organisms in the soil. And then eventually they reproduce, and then they take on more carbon, and they take on more carbon. So they're able to pull a lot more out of the atmosphere. So there's so many great, wonderful benefits to sheet mulching as well. So if you're interested in it, the first thing you should definitely do, however, is definitely apply for the rebate before you do anything. The rebate process seems relatively easy. It really all depends on which water agency you're dealing with, but generally it's really about measurements. What type of plantings are you going to be doing afterwards? Excuse me. Are you going to be entering any kind of big plants, little plants? But it's totally worth it, especially up to $4 a square foot. Is that for residential or for commercial, Michelle?
It is for both.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful. And then again, also too, depending on the water agency, sometimes there's rebates for drip irrigation, sometimes things like mulch, all different steps. So depending on if you're all in the same region, that totally works. So that's the first thing that you should do, because a lot of times people do it and then become disqualified. They need to see what the site is prior to sheet mulching, what your current water use is, stuff like that. So then once you've done that, then the next thing you're going to need to consider is, am I going to be planting anything that's maybe 5 gallons or larger on my site as part of my sheet mulch project? If so, then you definitely need to put those in the ground first, because you don't definitely want to dig up your wonderful work after sheet mulching. But please keep in mind that when you put these plants in the ground, traditionally I'm going to plant a 5-gallon plant and it's going to be equal with the soil, say it's a fruit tree or something like that. Or if I'm going to be planting something on a mound, to kind of increase the drainage. But if I'm going to be sheet mulching, I'm definitely going to want to make sure that I'm going to plant it a little slightly above the soil, because then I'm going to be adding my layers of cardboard, compost, and mulch, making it either even with the ground or slightly mounded, depending on the type of plant I'm trying to plant. So you're going to want to plant those first, making sure that you leave enough, definitely enough space for certain. Excuse me. And then you're definitely going to want to call 811, the call before you dig number, before you do any trenching, which is part of the sheet mulch process, or any planting of 5 gallons or larger. I just go onto the website and request a ticket. Just let them know you're doing trenching in a specific area in your yard. For sheet mulching, you're going to be using hand tools. And I usually do this a few days, about a week or so before I'm about to do my sheet mulching. And then they're going to send all the municipalities out, water, PG&E, cable, anything that might be running under the zone that you're going to be sheet mulching, and they'll come out and they'll flag it, or they'll paint it, or whatever the needs are. So that way, when it comes to digging, you can feel a lot more comfortable in not knowing that you're going to end up running into something that you're not going to want to run into. All right. So our first layer is going to be our weed blocker. It's cardboard. Now, cardboard, I believe, makes an excellent weed blocker. Again, this is made out of organic material, so it's eventually going to work its way down into the soil and build healthy soil. There are places to buy rolled cardboard, but it seems, to be honest, there's a lot more. It's becoming a little bit more difficult for purchase. I'm not really sure why. But that's been my experience trying to find rolled cardboard. I have had a lot of success by using recycled cardboard or just cardboard boxes. Generally, I just stick with, your simple traditional brown boxes, usually already printed. I usually don't go for white boxes or anything that's waxy or anything that has like a big color label on it. I love bike boxes. Those are the best. The picture in the right here on the slide is a bicycle box, which is probably twice as much as a regular cardboard box. And to be honest, at least 3 or 4 times thicker than rolled cardboard, which can be expensive. You can find these in do-nothing groups, or go to grocery stores or places like IKEA or Costco. Sometimes they just let you go ahead and dig through their cardboard. Sometimes I go to places like Trader Joe's when I know they're stocking, and then I just fill my cart with cardboard. And a lot of it was, when it comes to size, any kind of size is good, to be honest, because when you do use the cardboard boxes, they have those gaps in the corners. So overlapping is really going to be super key for that. So you're going to need small boxes for small areas, for corners, for, patching over other boxes that may have, gaps in them. So any kind of box is really a good box. I'm going to overlap them by 6 to 8 inches. And then some people like to lightly water them in order to anchor them in place. But sometimes that becomes problematic, because sometimes that cardboard can be very slippery. Slippery as a slip hazard for you, also slippery as it splits apart and creates gaps. And if you're trying to get rid of something pretty nasty underneath, maybe not just regular lawn. If it's regular lawn, everything's cool, but maybe you're trying to get rid of something like ivy or a Bermuda grass or something. You want that overlap. You want that really good coverage. And then if I'm trying to get rid of something nasty, I don't want to speed up the decomposition process by watering the cardboard. I want to put that cardboard on dry. If I'm getting rid of something nasty, I'm going to go as a thicker layer on top of it, because I really want to be able to choke it out. And then what I like to do is I'll just start in the corner. I'll put some cardboard down, and then I'll put compost on top of it to weigh it down, just leaving the edge where I can see it so I can do that good overlap. And then I'll just continue to patch my way through that, making sure I use all the compost on top of it. It's definitely less slippery, and then I cover the whole thing with mulch. The second layer is compost. It's about 1.5 to 2 inches on top of the cardboard. Again, it's holding on to moisture. It provides some basic nutrition for anything that you're going to be planting to help them get established. And again, it's going to clump those sandy particles together. It's going to aerate those clay particles, not instantly, but over time. Sheet mulching does a really good job of, of doing that. And then it's mulch on top, about minimum of 3 inches of that coarse mulch that we talked about on top of the compost layer. Again, is going to create that beautiful sponge. And then if I'm looking at my compost layer and my mulch layer, when it comes to irrigation tubing, I'm going to place them in between the compost and the mulch layer. Again, so that water goes and just stays where it needs to be. So it's going to reduce things like evaporation. It's also going to help kind of protect the irrigation tubing. They're kind of plasticky, rubbery kind of stuff. And sometimes I feel like they really take a hard beating in the sun. So by placing them in between, you're kind of, keeping them cool and keeping them protected in a longer term. Again, making sure that you give a little space around trees, especially things like trees. I usually give them like a good foot around that. And then again, mulch will need to be reapplied when it breaks down, which brings me to the question about tape on cardboard boxes. Everyone asks me, do I ever take the tape off of a cardboard box? And my answer to that is no, for 2 reasons. Sometimes when you rip tape off a cardboard box, what comes off with the tape? The cardboard box. And then now I've degraded my weed blocker. So I definitely don't want to do that. 2, if I see tape, then I know that either A, the mulch is worn down and the cardboard is worn down. So the tape is kind of like a flag, and then I can just pull that out and then put it in the garbage, definitely where that belongs. So when the time comes and I see it, I know that I need to patch. And then regular maintenance for sheet mulch usually ends up looking like move back the old mulch, find out where the bare patch or where the cardboard is broken down. I'm going to take a dry piece of cardboard. I'm going to pop it right down over the gap or the hole. Maybe a weed is poking up through it. I'm going to go ahead and patch it. I'm going to go wide. So the hole is this big. I'm going to double the size, patch it dry, put the old mulch back on top, and then retop that with some brand new mulch on top. And I'll continue to do that however long I definitely have my garden. Excuse me. Talked definitely about the sheet mulch kind of process, the definitely applying for the rebate, waiting for approval, 811. And then when it comes to, you're going to have to convert and cap certain things in your irrigation. And that's when it comes to stuff like trenching. When it comes to something like trenching, you're going to definitely trench along the hardscape edges. So wherever your project meets a sidewalk, a driveway, a patio, depending on where it is. Sometimes there's weird junction boxes or culverts in people's yards. You're going to have to kind of trench around that, with the idea being that when you want to sheet mulch, you want the mulch to stay where it is so we can do the work that it is. But say this is my sidewalk, and then I'm going to go ahead and sheet mulch, cardboard, compost, mulch. Now I've got this, 5-inch stack of materials. It's only place it's going to go is to spill over onto the sidewalk or onto the hardscape. I definitely want to avoid that. So by trenching, I'm going to trench about 3 to 6 inches down, about a foot wide, and at a 45-degree angle. So when I do cardboard, compost, and mulch, now they're even with the hardscape. And so the mulch can remain where it is. I'm going to do that 45-degree angle because if I do a 90-degree angle, nothing is going to sit on that bend. All it is going to be an exposed cardboard. Eventually weeds are going to pop out from that. If I can make it at a 45-degree angle to slope towards it, depending also on what I'm trying to get rid of, I may go down into the slope with the cardboard, and I may come up slightly along the side of my hardscape, especially if I'm trying to get rid of something nasty like a Bermuda grass or a runner weed. I definitely want to try to block as much as I can. That's also another reason why putting it into the trench, it blocks any potential runners that want to come out. Don't want to block the light, because chances are if a weed is going to want to escape, hardscape along that hardscape edge is exactly where it's going to want to come up. It's going to seek out that light. Now I have these clots of soil that I've done with the trenching, and I would maybe like to create mounds for visual interest or drainage along that. So I just organize them in whatever shape the person I'm doing the sheet mulch job for wants. I can make small mounds, you can make big mounds, you could do things like berms and swales as well, plant things that require a lot of water in the swale part, in the bottom part, the berm part, the hump. You're going to plant something that requires a little bit more drainage. Or if you're not into mounds, I would still suggest just taking those materials and spreading them evenly across your landscape and then sheet mulching them, because they're coming with soil, they are coming with plant material, but that type of material is not allowed in our organic scart, especially things because of the soil. So you're going to have to dump it into the trash can. And that's going to be something that's going to take several weeks to do. I say, why not just at least spread it evenly over and then sheet mulch on top of it for sure. This is an example of putting the cardboard into the trench. So you can see I'm using the edge of the cardboard, especially. To do that, I'm still going to overlap those 6 to 8 inches. And that's what it looks like when it gets trenched. And then there's a mound in the top right corner of it. Okay, hold on, let me go back. All right. All right, let me get to some of these questions. You are welcome, Kathy. All right, I'm going to start from the bottom. Do I recommend U-shaped nails to hold the cardboard? I do not. Again, this is going to be our weed blocker, so we want it to be as undisturbed as possible. For sure. You definitely want to make sure you wanted that to be undisturbed. The only time I may use something like nails or something hard is if I'm trying to sheet mulch maybe on a slope. And in that instance, then I would still use the cardboard, and I would definitely attach it to the slope. But then most likely I would probably cover the top of it with something like a jute fiber or something that's going to create traction on that slope, something that's going to hold that mulch in place. That would be the only time I would use some sort of nail situation for that. All right. After sheet mulching, do we need to water the area? If yes, why, or should it be dry? No, you do not. You do not need to water the area unless you've put plants in, and then you're going to water specifically those plants. And it can be dry for sure, no problem. And that's a nice thing about also too, sheet mulching is great thing to do maybe in the fall, because you're going to be able, depending on what you're trying to get rid of, if you're trying to get rid of something nasty, like Bermuda grass or ivy, I always recommend that you wait at least 6 months in order to start planting, because again, I don't want to degrade the integrity of the weed blocker. And then by putting a plant, especially in Bermuda grass, the first thing that happens is you put the plant in there, and then the Bermuda grass grows up and starts to try to take over your plant. We definitely want to definitely try to avoid that. But if you're just getting rid of just regular good old variety lawn, you can sheet mulch and plant at the same time. Fall is a great time to do that because of course the cooler weather, of course, you don't want to shovel mulch and compost in 100-degree heat. So it's shorter days, and then take advantage of any water that we might be getting, not only to get your plant established, but to kind of just set the kind of bar for the moisture once the mulch gets saturated. All right. Excuse me. What kind of mulch is recommended? I am a big proponent of recycled content mulch. So if you can get it from a tree trimmer or something like chip drop, I always think that's also a really great option. It's a great option because it's very budget friendly. But if you are, but sometimes there's a bit of a lag when it comes to doing stuff like that. So if you want to have to go out and actually buy it, then I would recommend, of course, if you can find recycled content mulch, by all means. As far as size wise is concerned, you probably want your pieces, your individual pieces, to be about 2 to 3 inches in length. That makes for excellent, excellent coverage. Anything smaller than that is pretty much on its way to decomposing because it's already small. Anything bigger than that, like those big kind of redwood chips, they don't really cover. They just kind of seesaw on top of each other and create kind of gaps. 2 to 3 inch pieces just covers and mats just lovely, just lovely. If I'm buying mulch and I'm buying colored mulch, I always tell everybody just avoid the black mulch, just for the fact that it gets very hot, especially in the summertime, of course, and it radiates that heat back into the base of your plant. So sometimes you'll see just the bottom of plants that have been planted around black mulch just crispy, and it heats the soil, even though it is mulch. And then of course that color originally fades. And then another thing I do like about arbor mulch is the fact that it just looks like it. I mean, it's pretty much just chipped up trees. So there's going to be pine needles, there's going to be leaves, there's going to be bark, and there's going to be all the wood fiber that comes along with it. And the idea that when leaves drop in your yard or you get leaves from your neighbors, in the fall, that it's just going to be incorporated. It's not going to, break up the solid color of the yard, because there is no solid color to have, for sure. If you do get wood chips from a tree trimmer, they are legally obligated to not give you anything diseased or anything pest riddled. And I've had situations where I've been waiting on mulch and I get a call in the morning and they said, okay, we're going to be in your neighborhood this afternoon. Would you like that mulch? I said, yes, absolutely. And then 2 hours later, I get a phone call saying, I'm sorry, it's got beetle blight and we can't give it to you. We're just going to go ahead and put you back on the list. So legally, they are not obligated. They're not allowed to give you anything that's diseased as well. And so when you're looking for arborists, I'm looking for something like an arborist or a certified tree trimmer, just because of the fact that that's all they're going to be dealing with. If you find yourself in a situation where you're going to maybe want to get like kind of people who just come and clean up and chip, then there's the possibility of contamination of like ivy or blackberry or something. You definitely don't want to introduce that into your garden, not at all. Let's see, what kind of mulch with chips other that need to be purchased? Okay, I think I answered that one as well. Awesome. Now, when it comes time to actually plant, like I said, if it's just regular old lawn, you can wait. You can plant, right away. I usually like to let people wait for the fall and winter to plant. It just makes it that much easier on your plants. And plants can be expensive in some instances, so you want to really kind of maximize your money for that. When it's you've already planted your 5-gallon plants, usually those are big trees or big shrubs, things you want all really established or kind of focal points for your yard. So I understand 5 gallons is the way to go. But when it comes to planting and you're thinking about like 1-gallon plants or 4-inch plants, if I'm going to be planting a 1-gallon plant in my sheet mulch, I'm going to find the space. I'm going to cut an X into the cardboard, and I'm going to lift up the 4 corners of that. And from there, of course, I'm going to move my compost and mulch aside, cut into it. I'm going to rifle through a little bit of the soil to kind of loosen it up and dig a bit of a hole. Sometimes I just have to remove some of that soil and set that aside, put that somewhere else. And then I'm going to take my plant out. 9 times out of 10, your 1-gallon plant is going to be a little bit root bound, and you know what that is. It's just going to be a whole mass of roots on the end. Your goal is to make sure that you're going to try to loosen those roots as much as you possibly can before you plant it in the hole. You need that, the plant needs to be kind of set free a little bit. It doesn't want to spend its first few weeks just trying to get itself untangled. So I'm going to loosen the root ball. I'm going to place it in the hole. I'm going to return the cardboard around it, the mulch, and excuse me, the compost on top of the cardboard, and then return the mulch around it as well. That's 1 gallon. But if I have 4-inch plants, I don't even have to cut into the cardboard at all. So I just need to move back my compost and mulch. I'm going to take my 4-inch plant. 9 times out of 10, a 4-inch plant is not going to be root bound. There are a few exceptions. And then I'm just going to literally place it right on top of the cardboard. I'm going to return the compost and return the mulch. And the roots themselves are going to penetrate down into the cardboard and get established. I think this is a great technique for those people who are getting rid of something nasty and want to plant after it's had an opportunity. You don't want to give it any purchase. You don't want to give it any opportunity to kind of come. This way you don't have to cut the cardboard, and you can go ahead and put that right on top. You don't have to give them any light. Any questions about sheet mulching? Let me see where. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Recycling water. We have so many different options. The rain barrel in the far right, far left corner is my own rain barrel that I got for my birthday last year. So I've been collecting a fair amount of this rainwater. It's been very nice. Other options, of course, are, I've seen a lot of these here. I'm not sure if Bosca has it, but here we have Contra Costa water, where you can actually go and obtain recycled water. That's where I usually see these lovely little kind of enclosed plastic things. People go and get recycled water to use for it. Generally, as part of I think the water treatment process. It's usually very high in nitrogen, I've been told, but you can use it on any kind of plant. A lot of people like to use it to grow grass, which is kind of counterintuitive to what we're talking about today. And then the 2 other examples are generally about things associated with gray water, recycling water, primarily from your washing machine. There's called laundry to landscape programs. Sorry, there was a question. What do I do about gophers? Well, with gophers, especially with plants, gopher cages are going to be the way to go. Or if you're doing something like raised beds, 1/4-inch mesh lined on the bottom of any bed that you might be using is going to be key as well, because they may be able to kind of nibble at the roots, but they're not going to be able to chuck the entire plant down. Yeah, gophers are really becoming very problematic. There is the laundry to landscape. The laundry to landscape gray water system allows us to take water from our washing machines and use that to irrigate our trees. Generally, gray water is mostly used things on perennials. The laundry to landscape, sometimes there are some great rebates involved with the 3-valve system for gray water. There's other gray water systems, but generally those require a permit if you wanted to divert water from your shower, anything like that. There's a great example of a gray water system if you ever look up the Eco House in Berkeley. They have a gray water system that is that comes from the shower, and it creates this beautiful oasis of water-loving plants. And they also have laundry to landscape that provides water for their provides water for their perennial plants, including the fruit trees. Gray water cannot be stored, so it's pretty much water on demand. So, and the nice thing about the 3-valve system is you have the option of, when you want water to go to the gray water system, it can go to gray water. But in times of, wet winters, I'm sure a lot of people don't have their gray water system going. I can take that water diverted to the sewer where it's going to get treated. Also too, if there's anything that I'm washing that I don't want to introduce, so maybe something on my clothes or something, I don't want to introduce that water into my garden, I also have the option of switching it up as well. You do have to switch off to non-phosphate soaps. Sometimes they do make the pH of the water a little bit alkaline. So especially if I'm incorporating something where I'm growing something that provides likes acid loving plants, to say maybe I'm doing something like blueberries or maybe something like citrus. I may flush the soil, just kind of reduce the sodium levels for that, because sometimes that's a bit of a buildup. Or I'm going to add something like coffee grounds to increase the acidity of that soil. I like to use coffee grounds to increase the acidity in the soil. However, I like to use them thinly, not thickly. Coffee grounds are notorious for getting moldy relatively quick, but I do like to use them in a lot of acid-loving plants, including things like camellias and rhododendrons and azaleas and stuff like that. Gray water cannot be stored, unlike something like rainwater. Rainwater is on demand all the time. Oh. There's a 3-valve system, as you can see. Like I said, you can switch from sewer to landscape. Nice thing about it is you don't need a permit for it. And I know that there's a lot of water agencies. You may want to check your local water agency to see if they're offering rebates specifically for that valve. You also have the option, and I'm not sure exactly what they're doing these days. There's an organization, they're called Gray Water Action. They used to be called the Gray Water Gorillas back when gray water was something you kind of did on the hush hush. But they usually do classes that are or workshops that are associated with it. So say I wanted to install a gray water system in my house, I would invite Gray Water Action to come. I'd be responsible for paying for the supplies for the install, usually about $300 to $400. They invite, several people to my house, and then we all learn how to install my gray water system that day. I get the gray water system. Everyone who participates gets the option of learning how to do it themselves as well. Harvesting rainwater. You can go as fancy as you want to when it comes to rainwater. I do have what I call a fancy rainwater, but I also, right next to it is just a 5-gallon bucket. You can use anything. The thing about usually with rainwater is it can't be stored indefinitely. Usually the only thing you usually have to be concerned of is too much contamination, things like leaves. So you're always going to make sure that your rainwater catchment has some sort of a screen or something to catch, leaves, debris, and stuff like that, because that eventually in the water is going to kind of turn the water funky. Sometimes there's issues, especially as we approach the hotter months in spring, where there's concerns with mosquitoes. So you can use BT dunks. Either they come kind of in these little like donut shapes, or they come granular. It's a bacteria that kills mosquito larvae, but it makes the water still potable. So I can still use it to water my plants. If I have kids and pets, they will not be affected by that at all. So the nice thing about it is you can just dunk it in the water. I believe it's like one dunk is going to last about 30 days. So when the hot months come and you're kind of want to be able to pull out that rainwater, you will also have the option for that as well. I've seen a lot of DIY kind of rain catchment. I saw that $200 rebate for the rain barrels. That's wonderful. I would definitely try to take advantage of that as well, because this can't just be the last year that we have actual rain. Please say it's not. All right. Drip irrigation. Now, I'm not a plumber. I don't like to mess with PVC too much. So when it comes to irrigation conversion, I'm going to want to take into consideration how easy this is going to be for me. And I can go to the valve and I can, cut it, and most likely I'll have to attach something like a pressure regulator and a filter to that in order to convert whatever area, most likely sheet mulching, into drip irrigation. But again, I don't like to do that. So I like to buy a lovely little pop-up conversion kit. It looks exactly like a sprinkler head. It fits exactly on a 1/2-inch connection to the PVC sprinkler head. I'm just going to take an old sprinkler head. I'm going to replace it with that. I'm going to make sure that it's going to be somewhere convenient, maybe kind of uphill if my area is kind of sloped. Central, if it's say it's in a lawn and maybe I'm going to want to work off from the middle and work my way out. It has a pressure regulator and a filter in it. And so it reduces my pressure to about 30 pounds per square inch, which is very important because if you allow the water that comes out of your pipes, you're going to bust out that drip irrigation for sure. And the other example is just creating a schedule. You can see this one is hydrozones according to different things. That this garden had like an orchard. This one had a drought tolerant area, and so they were able to plan kind of accordingly. And that's really where smart controllers really come into play. Also, a lot of smart controllers too have this thing. It's where it's called I'm able to turn down the amount of water that I have. It's called like seasonal adjustment. So say, heat of the summer, all my plants are getting 100% of the water. But then, like right now, we're not getting a lot of water, but we're getting some water. So I can reduce the adjustment maybe down to something like 30% or 40%. And then as we get into hotter months, I can increase the amount. So I'm not really changing the timing of it, because sometimes that can be, depending on the system that you have, that might be kind of an issue, but it's all going to be the same amount of time, the same days. It's just the amount of water that they're going to be getting depending on the time of the year. So seasonal adjustment is a great option for gardeners, I think. Drip irrigation. This is my planter bed in my backyard. I like to use emitter tubing. They space out anywhere between 6 to 8 inches along the tube line. So I'm able to, place them here in my planter bed. So it's going to spread water evenly throughout the, spread water evenly throughout the bed, as opposed to like a drip emitter that's going to be specific to a plant, which is also still good. Let's see. We talked about converting pop-up sprinklers to drip, which is nice. Laying emitters and hoses between the compost and the mulch layer for sure, in order to protect them, in order to reduce evaporation for sure. And then if you have any questions, check out your local irrigation store. They're going to have all the stuff that you need in order to be successful, which is nice. I usually go to something like an urban farmer. That's just what's close to me. And it's great. You can just take pictures. There are no stupid questions or anything. You can give them a layout, let them know where your existing irrigation is, what you're planning on doing, and they can really definitely help you out. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to irrigation, but my friend Chris, who taught me irrigation, said it's really kind of about Legos. It's really about making sure that things connect and things don't leak. So it can be very, very easy, and it can be very fun. Irrigation can be a fun project. I know it doesn't seem that way, but it can be. I see a question. Oh, that's going to come up at the end. Excuse me. How to get a hold of me. Here we are. Oops, sorry. I think I went too far. There we go. If you ever need to get a hold of me, if you have any questions, again, I'm going to convert this PowerPoint to a PDF. So it's going to be a lot easier to email to everyone. And then I'm also going to have some resources that I like to pass along to you as well. I saw that website that you had included, Michelle. I believe Zone 7 used to have a website like that. There was a tab on there where it said My List. So if you're looking for like water-wise plants, I believe those types of websites allow you to search for certain types of plants and create a list, something that you can print out and take with you to the nursery, or maybe you're meeting with a landscape designer and these are the types of plants that you want. So you have a lot of options. I think that's really nice. So yeah, this is how you can find to get a hold of me. Again, like I said, Michelle's going to be sending along some information that I'm going to be sending to her. So I'm just going to send that in a separate separate email, Michelle.
Sounds good. Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions for me today?
Either raise your hand or type in the Q&A box.
Thank you for spending your Sunday morning with me.
Yeah, thank you guys. Okay, I do not see any other questions or hands raised, so I think we can wrap it up.
Oh, there's one just dropped in. What if we don't wait for 6 months to plant? Like again, it all depends on what you're trying to get rid of underneath. If you're just trying to get rid of regular old grass, that shouldn't be a problem. You can go ahead and sheet mulch depending on the time of the year. You can sheet mulch and plant immediately. But if you don't, then you, of course, there's always runs the risk of when you create that hole for light to come through. I've seen a lot of like plants that are just minding their own business. And now there's like this huge mat of whatever is trying to grow around it. And then it becomes competition for it. So that can be a little bit problematic. Stop share here real quick. There we go. Oh, I see some more questions. For sheet mulching to kill crabgrass. Oh, do you need to be unmuted? I think someone needs to be unmuted. I'm not sure if it's.
Okay. Okay. So you are now allowed to talk. You have to unmute yourself though. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Lori. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. Thank you. This is very educational, very informative. Appreciate it very much. So here's the pros and cons. I understand we have crabgrass along the edges of the lawns. We have one in the front and two in the backyard. So one option is to sheet mulch and wait 6 months till everything dies. And if we can't wait 6 months, if we just remove the lawn, is there any way to control the crabgrass from coming back?
No, because even if you do, because if you remove are you going to remove the lawn and then sheet mulch?
No, just remove the lawn mechanically. If you want to do it sooner, if you want to plant sooner, just remove the lawn mechanically. And then how do we control the crabgrass from coming back? I
mean, to be honest, you would have to, I would not recommend removing the lawn again, because you would have to make arrangements in order for it to have a dumpster come and dispose of that, because I believe you're the one that had the plastic mat. So between the plastic mat and the clumps of soil, that all has to go into the landfill, because mostly because of the plastic. Also because of the soil, because the soil can't be mixed in with the organics. And if you're trying to get rid of crabgrass or Bermuda grass, the kind of laddery looking stuff you pull it, that's Bermuda grass. Not knowing how deep you would have to go, it runs really deep in the soil. So if you're trying to get rid of your actual lawn, to be honest, you would probably have to go down at least 6 inches, because it is that tenacious. I've successfully sheet mulched it. But again, it might be something you might have to wait. So I would say that if you were interested in getting rid of your crabgrass, like right now, sheet mulch right now while the temperatures are still cool. And then that way you can plant in the fall. Also, planting in the fall also has its advantages, because this way your plants are not going to do very well if you plant them right now, because they're going to be very small, and they're going to be not only are they going to be competing with the possible Bermuda grass that's going to come back. Bermuda grass is very tenacious. Also, too, are you the originator of the Bermuda grass, or did you get Bermuda grass from a neighbor?
I think originator.
Okay, so you're the originator, which means chances are your neighbors might have Bermuda grass that surround you. There's also the possibility that might double back and come back at you as well. So I have a couple suggestions for that. If you're concerned that it's gonna come back, plant something with a fibrous root along the border, along between you and your neighbors. There's a beautiful California aster. It's California native. It is drought tolerant, but the root systems are so fibrous, it makes it difficult for Bermuda grass to penetrate through it. So by planting it along the borders, if the Bermuda grass wants to circle back, it can do that. So, but to sheet mulch successfully, you're going to need to do several things. The trenching is going to have to be really on point. You're going to have to really go really hard on that 45-degree angle. Chances are you're probably going to have to bend that cardboard down into the trench and then come up almost to the top of it to really kind of block it. Along this hardscape edge, this is my sidewalk or something, along this straight edge of concrete, you're going to want to also make sure that any Bermuda grass that's along the edge, you're going to want to scrape that edge. Scrape that edge and make sure that you cover it with the cardboard. You're going to want to go thicker on the cardboard and at least 4 inches of mulch on top in really order to choke it out. Otherwise, you're going to have to go at least, if you want to remove it, it's going to at least 6 inches. And then you're going to have to pay to have that dumped.
Big question.
Thank you.
I know it's not the best. I know it's not definitely maybe not the advice that you were hoping for, but Bermuda grass is pretty tenacious.
Is there any
very tenacious.
Is there any workshops coming up showing the sheet mulching demonstration?
I am going to be at the Water Conservation Showcase. It's going to be actually in San Ramon in June. And I am going to be doing 2 sheet mulch parties. One of them is going to be in Pleasanton. And the other one is going to be, I believe, in Livermore, but not until October. So there is some stuff that's going to be coming up. If you're interested, really seriously interested in sheet mulching, I'd love to recommend the website lawntogarden.org. I do some work with the Alameda County Waste Management Authority. We're also known as Stop Waste. And we have the lawntogarden.org website is all about sheet mulching. There are videos, there's plant lists, there's links to all the rebates. There's a resource calculator. So if I'm wanting to sheet mulch and I need to know how much cardboard, compost, and mulch I need, 2 inches of compost, 3 inches of mulch, I just put the square footage of my project and it tells me how much cardboard, compost, and mulch I will need for that project and pretty much the approximate price of how much it's going to cost.
Okay, and this is Alameda County?
It is, but the marketplace and all the stuff is regional. It's all over California. There's also a marketplace where if you put your zip code in, and I believe that's regional, that's Bay Area specific, you can find places to buy recycled content, recycled content compost and recycled content mulch. It's a really great website. There's plans and designs and all kinds of stuff on there.
So the website you mentioned, Lawn to Garden, where is that website?
.org?
Yeah, lawntogarden.org. Okay.
.org. Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Do you do party in Fremont, the sheet mulching party in Fremont area?
We have in the past, but usually right now it's usually about what the city wants. And these projects I'm working with usually with water agencies, with Zone 7 or the city of Livermore. The Water Conservation Showcase is the East Bay Mud thing. So it all depends on what the city is interested in. So if the city is interested in doing a sheet mulch project, I usually get contacted from the water agency, which is ACWD for you guys.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see, I think I saw, let me see if there's any other questions in. Oh, it was just about the crabgrass. Yeah, you can't be successful. Like I said, and then if that's the case, please just use cardboard boxes. Try to find bike boxes if you can. I mean, they are pretty much, the box itself is an enclosed box, is about 6 feet long. So you're getting, when you open it up, it's about 12 feet. It's at least 3 layers. So you can cover a huge swath of ground thickly with not that much cardboard. So bike boxes, appliance boxes, like fridge boxes, stuff like that. That's another really good indicator, another really good tip as far as sheet mulching over Bermuda grass. It's really about really not giving them an ounce of light in order to do that, and making sure that trenching is on point.
Okay, very, very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good luck. You can do it.
I'll encourage the Fremont City Water District to host a lawn to garden sheet mulching party and put you in contact with them and see if it works.
Yeah, why not?
Will do.
Awesome. I love to see that. If anyone also is a resident of Hayward and wants to have that as well, please contact me. We could just, as long as we have interest, we can set that up for you guys. So that sounds really interesting. Thank you, Lori.
It is. I mean, it's a really fun party. I basically talk about the stuff that I talk here today, and then, you invite a lot of people to come over. And as soon as you put a pile of mulch in front of your house, everybody wants to know what it is that you're doing, what's going on, and you invite people to come. I did a sheet mulch party last year in Pleasanton. The space wasn't very big. It was like 800 square feet, and 40 people showed up to help sheet mulch it. We got it done in an hour.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
It was so fast. And then, and then it becomes very educational. The water agencies come, and they talk their stuff. We had the designer for the project come and talk about it. So there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of videos on that Lawn to Garden. You'll see me on there explaining all the different steps and stuff about sheet mulching as well. So you should definitely check out that Lawn to Garden website.
Awesome. And also on that topic too, the city of Hayward also has a compost giveaway on May 20th. So it's the most popular event that we have. We always read out really quickly. So if you need interest in that, it's on our website where it's located, but it's May 20th, Saturday, May 20th coming up.
Awesome.
All right. Any other questions or anything else? Then we will wrap it up. Again, our contact, and we'll be contacting you after this class, just sending you guys the slides and our contact information for any information that you guys have any follow-up questions. So thank you all for spending your morning with us. Thank you, Lori, again for the fantastic information and really helpful guides. So all right, everyone, have a good rest of your weekend.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.